Fevers. I'm the lead guitar player and worship leader at a church called One Church, and I also play in a band called The Praise Record. I made a worship pedalboard walkthrough video last year, but it was a sort of half-finished build of my pedalboard, and it's changed a lot since then. So I thought I would make an updated one since the last one was so popular. Here is worship pedalboard walkthrough version 2.0. So the first pedal on my pedalboard is the MXR Dyna Comp, which is my compressor, and I leave it always on. So if you're not familiar with what compressors do, this is sort of the difference between it off and it on. Without it, I can play pretty softly and then get pretty loud if I want to. And with it on, I'm always kind of somewhere in between. So that loud part doesn't get quite as loud, but all of the softer parts are much louder. And I like that because it means when I'm playing like a clean passage or something, I'm always still sitting where I should be in the band mix. So I have that on all the time. I like how it sounds. To me, it adds a certain rounded off, polished quality to my guitar playing. It sounds a little bit less like sloppy live guitar and more like how a guitar sounds on a album or something. Next up, I have my tuner, which is a TC Electronic Polytune, and I love it. I like it better than my last tuner even. The gimmick it has and why it's called the Polytune is that you can strum all your strings at once and it will tell you which ones are out of tune at that moment, like this. Which I don't use all that often. I usually just use it like a regular tuner. One note at a time like you would, but it's very accurate and I like it a lot. Next up is sort of an oddball. I have this MicroPog from ElectroHarmonix, and it's an octave pedal. One of the things I use that for is doubling leads, and it sounds a little silly by itself. I'll play it alone and I'll play it with some distortion and delay on, which is how I'd actually use it. So if you're playing a lead kind of low on the guitar neck, it can add a lot of presence if you double it an octave higher. So this is what that would sound like. I'll do it without the pedal, with the pedal, and then with like some other pedals. Let's say this is my lead I'm trying to play. And then here's with the octave up on. So you can probably already hear that higher octave is adding a lot of presence and making it really jump out. It sounds a little strange by itself, but if I kick on like a delay and a distortion, it sounds pretty cool. I can also do it the other way around, where I'm playing very high on the neck and it adds an octave lower. You'll notice by the time I'm done, that sounds pretty much the same as what I just did a minute ago. So this is the other way around, playing very high and then adding a low octave. Here's the lead by itself. And then here's with the low. And here's with everything. So two ways to get the same effect, but either way it kind of makes your solo sound interesting and more full. And then the other thing I would use this for is a volume swell. It gives it something of like an organ-like quality. It adds like these high shimmery harmonics to what you're doing. So here's like a volume swell with some delays on, just a typical kind of fade-in thing. And then here's that with the MicroPog. So I think it sounds great on volume swells. It makes it sound almost like a pad or an organ of some kind. Definitely cool. It's not a must-have pedal. It's a little strange, but I have a lot of fun with it. I use it probably every service at least like once. And then next up over here, I have my Proko Rat, which is my heavier distortion pedal. The Rat is used in all kinds of music, up to and including like hard rock and heavy metal. So it can get pretty heavy, but I have it dialed in with the distortion knob a little lower. And I would use this for like a rock intro to a song, something that starts pretty big, or to get louder on a chorus or something. So on any song that starts with like a big guitar lead, this is what I would probably use. And I wouldn't crank it much further than that, or you definitely will head into like a heavy metal type of space. But I like that Rat a lot. It's a really good distortion pedal. Here on the very end of my board is what I consider kind of my modulation slot. And right now I've got a tremolo in there, but I sub it out for a chorus sometimes. I don't use a lot of modulation, so I'm okay to have just kind of one on there at a time. But here's the tremolo. So that's cool. And then the other pedal I sub in here sometimes is also a Den Electro, but it's the chorus. So here's the chorus version. I'll pop that on there if I want to do kind of a... Chorus has kind of an 80s, 90s vibe, and a lot of bands in the 80s and 90s gave it a bad name by kind of overusing it, but I would use this on clean parts if I wanted to add like a little bit of shimmer or depth to something. So here's like a clean part without it. And here's with the chorus. You can crank up the speed and the depth and get to like a really like Nirvana sounding place. Like this. But that's not how I would use it. Next up is my volume pedal, which in my case is a Dunlop high gain volume pedal. This is great for those swells I was doing earlier, especially if you have some delays or something on. You can do these big washes of sound. And especially in a church setting, these are very useful because if you're doing like an acoustic song or a piano song, this may be all you do for big parts of the song, is just these big washes in the background, adding like ambience and atmosphere. Without the delays and things on, it just does a straight fade in and out, which is less useful. So if you have a volume pedal, you'll definitely want to pair it with some kind of a delay or a reverb. Next up, I have my Ibanez Tube Screamer, which is my lesser of my two gains. It's an overdrive, which comes below distortion like the Rat. And I would use this for either songs that don't need to get that heavy, you know, just like big strummy open chords or something. And then the other thing I would use the Tube Screamer for is to have different gain stages and have it maybe use the overdrive on a verse and then go to like a distortion or something for the chorus so it gets louder. So that could be something like this. So it's nice to have different levels of gain that you can go to. Next up in line here, I have my ambient effects, so delays and reverbs. First up among the delays is my Boss DD3. It's a really good, just standard like digital delay. It has a nice sound. So I would use this one for just typical kind of like nice delay things. And then if I want a few more options and a little bit more customizability, there's this TC Electronic Flashback, which I love. And it can do that same sort of digital delay sound if you put it on the 2290 setting like this. But the more that I mess with it, I'm starting to realize it can do a lot of other things. One of the reasons I bought it is for dotted eighth note delays. You can do that sort of U2 style thing. Which is super fun. Another thing this one is great for is the tape delay setting right here, which I've taken to using a lot. It adds a really sort of a dark, warbly shimmer to your sound, and especially if you're going to be doing delays that hold out for a while, I feel like it has a lot of character. So something like this. So that's a really beautiful setting. I use that a lot. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that pedal can do. All right, after that I have the ElectroHarmonix Cathedral stereo reverb right here. It's my favorite reverb. And I have it set for kind of a hall reverb, mostly to play behind clean parts like this. And basically the reason I selected this reverb over the other good ones is this tap infinite switch right here, which lets you strum something, and then as soon as you click that switch, it'll hold out your reverb tail until you let up on it. So it's good for creating little pads behind yourself and stuff. And that'll just continue until I let off of the pedal. The only downside of doing that is that while that's going, anything you play over it isn't getting reverbed, so it pairs nicely with like a delay pedal or something to keep some ambience to the other stuff you're playing. But I could do something like this. And then that'll just keep ringing out. Until I let off of it. And my final pedal here is this little tiny looper called the Ditto looper by TC Electronic. It's a great deal of fun and sounds great. It only has one button, so you have to be very careful with what you're doing because that one button controls all of its functions. So it's very easy to mess up in a live setting. If you're at home and you're just messing around, it's really great for songwriting or practicing because you can just loop like a phrase. So something like this. But in like a worship service, I wouldn't want to get into something that involved if the band has to keep up with me. So what I tend to use it for is like ambient transitions between things, which is also a great use for a looper, is just to get this pad of stuff going. And I'll make it ahead of time and then I can just kick it on. So something like this. And then just kind of have that stored in the looper. And when we get to the end of a song, I can, kick that on. And go into the song or whatever. But that's what I use the looper for, at least in a worship service. And then another note about the pedalboard setup, you might be able to tell I've got these two pedals on a little riser. I have it that way because I kept hitting the knobs on this Cathedral when I was going for the top row, and so I put them on this little step so that they're safely above everything, and then I custom made something like that for the Ditto as well, so that I'm not hitting these knobs. But that's something to pay attention to when you're setting up a pedal board, is that when you go for the second row, you're not hitting stuff on the front row with your foot, which I definitely was. So that's my new improved pedal board, and if you're getting started in putting one together, I hope that gives you a sense of some of the options that are out there. If you want a way more involved look at building a pedal board, I have a channel on curious.com where I've put together a set of lessons about worship, guitar, and pedal board putting together. So check that out if you want to. Otherwise, glad you watched.